Now excited to be joined by a very special guest. It is my guy Trey Wallace, who covers really just everything for Outkick at this point. Man, you're all over the place. You've been I feel like covering like a new random story each day that comes out that's interesting, and you have your pulse on just all things college athletics. But before we get to we're going to talk a lot of Tennessee things, a lot of current things in college sports. But have you been to any recent weddings in which a certain Michael Jordan has been at lately?
It comes to mind. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it's really, man. Let me tell you something. That guy, for as he has that aura about him, that everybody's like, oh, I wonder what he's really like, in real life or whatever, real life. But he's really just a cool cat that likes to smoke cigars and chill out. And if folks don't know what we're talking about, whatever. My first cousin, Bubba Wallace, drives for Michael Jordan and Denny Hamlin for 23XI. And yeah, there have been times. I mean, I go back and my dad would tell me a story. I wasn't able to make Daytona like the first year that they started the new team and whatnot, and he's just chilling at Michael Jordan's RV on the backstretch, smoking cigars and having drinks with Michael, and they're just chatting about life. Like it was like he's sending me a text message, a photo, and I'm, wait a minute, where are you at? You're at Michael's RV, okay? And it's not an RV; it's like a big old house on wheels. It's not like a regular RV. Um, but man, yeah, just it is. It's pretty darn cool. Like Bubba does his things on Sundays. We got a big family group chat that we all mess around with during the weeks, and like every single day, we're always having conversations. But when Bubba got married, it was pretty darn cool in downtown Charlotte, and Denny shows up, Hamlin, and Ryan Blaney's Bubba's best man, and all of a sudden you look over and you're like, okay, I know who that is. I'm not going to stop dancing, but this is going to be a little bit embarrassing. So it's it's really neat, man. I'm proud of Cuz, but man, getting to work for Michael Jordan, that's just badass. So props to my Cuz for getting that deal done.
You haven't lived until you've taken a break from the Cupid Shuffle to go look over at MJ and see what he's up to.
Yeah, dude, and it was just like I'm not a stargazer, but it's Michael Jordan. You know what I mean? Like, okay, like you look at, oh man, this is really cool. I want to introduce myself, and stuff like that. And the cool part about it is, I try to catch 3 to 4 races a year. With our schedule, Connor, we're always going, but met him a couple times. Really cool guy, and he knows. I mean, he knows NASCAR. He grew up in it. He knows the sport. I've been a fan since I was 10 years old. Then my cousin got in the business. But overall, man, it's really cool. And the sport's taken off and it's getting a lot better. And when you have somebody like Michael Jordan or even Pitbull, like Pitbull's involved in it. And he's a cool guy too, I might add. But it's something to see, man, when you're walking on the back stretch and there's 6'7", 6'8" Michael Jordan just smoking on a cigar, walking down, hanging out with folks.
Yeah, it was wild when because I remember it was a couple years ago. It was before a bowl game or something like that, and I said like, "Oh, you gonna be there this weekend or something?" And you're like, "Actually, my cousin's getting married. MJ's gonna be at the wedding." And I'm like, "Wait a minute, back up. Let's go explain all this." So that's where that interaction all kind of began because when you get an opportunity to go to an event like that, I mean, you take that opportunity 10 times out of 10.
I was kind of agitated too because he had the wedding on the damn CFP semifinals. So I missed that magical game in Atlanta with Ohio State and Georgia. And I'm sitting here watching it on my phone while it's all going down. But the things you do for family, he knows not to do something like that again. Hopefully, he never will. But, how fall weddings are getting into the winter. He's not thinking about me and my work. He's thinking about what his wife wants to do. So screw them, whatever. They made me miss out on the CFP great game.
Trey, let's start with something you wrote about last week that's got plenty of current relevance to it. Hugh Freeze, he went on with our friends in the next round and talked about the need for enforceable player contracts, if that's kind of the next step with college athletics, if we're going to get to this place where, there is collective bargaining and all that stuff, and, media, revenue sharing, all that stuff. Essentially, if a player fulfills his duties or fails to fulfill those duties, and then if he leaves somewhere else, then that the next school would have to be able to honor that. Player buyouts is what you're kind of talking about here. We have them for coaches, so it would make sense for players too, right? Like that's where it feels like this could be heading.
It does, and Hugh makes a good point. And I've talked to a couple collectives out there, big time collectives too, in regards to the situation of, okay, do you have some kind of contingency plan or buyouts right now in your deals? I think everybody will look at the Texas A&M class when NIL was, the inception of NIL when it first started, and you look at it and you saw how many players had left, and there's certain language in these contracts that, maybe if a player is making so much at another school, okay, 5 or 10% might go back to that collective that he first signed with. But I don't know, and this is not a knock, I'm just saying, I don't know if they were smart enough when NIL first started. And that's not a knock. It's just because NIL was so new that you would have buyouts and deals to get out. Okay, you're going to go to A&M. Okay, you remember the thing Walter Nolan did. He did it on social media. He said, hey, for players, make sure you're checking your contracts, before you move around. I'm not saying anything about Walter, but I'm saying this is the type of stuff that they're talking about right now. And I think that's kind of leveled out. But Hugh makes a great point, and I don't disagree with him. I think when you have buyouts and coaches' contracts and they go to the next school, I mean, you remember, look at Gus, or, he was fired, but you look at coaches that have taken other jobs. Usually the school will pay the buyout. Sometimes, some of the times the school will pay the buyout, but then also the coach will pay it, but then there will be some big bonus that the coach gets, and it's actually for the buyout, that he paid off. I think with college athletics and the way that we're going now, when athletes start signing these deals with schools, because it's coming with revenue sharing. I mean, it's coming, whether you like it or not. I think a year from now, at this time, if we're sitting here recording something, I think we are talking about how much a player is making at a certain school. And we will know that because I think there's going to be a baseline to it for student athletes, $45,000, $50,000 a year. And then you go make your money off NIL as well, I think, with collectives. So with contracts, Connor, it makes sense to me, because if you've got a kid that signs with Auburn, and let's say, and we all know these scholarships are year to year, okay? We get that. You can be processed out, right after spring ball or before spring ball. That term is going to change. It's now going to be, you've been fired. You can call it like that if you want. I don't care, but that's how it's going to be. And so what happens if a player is processed? Okay, I don't think you should owe the school anything if you're processed out. Now, if you enter the portal because you had a fantastic year and you're looking for more money, and you hear through back channels, okay, well, let's just say LSU is offering more money to come there. I think that, and I agree with Hugh, that in the professional model, the way that we are going, the player should have to pay something back to the school that he's leaving. And it might not be the player. It might be the NIL collective that he's going to, the next school, or it might be the athletic department. And I don't think this is going to be a lot of money. I think when a player signs a deal with a school, Connor, it's not like he's signing for $1 million. I think that comes from the outside NIL perspective. But could I see an Auburn, let's just see an Auburn receiving $15,000 from LSU because LSU stole one of their players? Absolutely. You want out of this? Pay for it. And so, the realization in talking to coaches over the last couple of weeks and administrators around, the country, is that they've been putting together these models for the last couple of months now, and they've been working towards how are we going to make this revenue sharing work? And one of those factors is, like, Hugh Freeze just didn't pull that out of the air. He's had conversations with his athletic director and then the SEC and other coaches about what that looks like. And I think if we're going to be a professional type of sport, and let's be honest, that's kind of what it is, then you should have to pay something if you're just leaving one school and going to better another.
It's essentially what the NFL does with compensatory picks, right? Like if you have an elite free agent who leaves, then the school that or the team that he left, if you're in this top 35 percentile, whatever it is, that program, that organization gets taken care of, and they have all these compensatory picks in the NFL draft. They all have to be through like rounds 3 through 7, the way that it sets up.
Yeah.
It'd be more significant if I'm Kent State or if I'm Georgia State. So, some program at the group of 5 level, or Tulane, Tulane loses a Chris Brazzell II who goes to Tennessee. And it's like, all right, well, Tulane just has to watch one of their best players leave for a big time program. They get nothing on the back end of that except, we developed you, go have fun. Like, getting something for those programs in a world that feels so anti-group of 5, anti-FCS would be a huge win if that was established in a collective bargaining.
Well, because you can't sell. Hey, look what we did. We recruited Chris Brazzell to come here, and we developed him, but then some other school came and stole him and took him away. It's hard to sell that. And I think I think the G5 is about to change. The G4, I think the schools like Georgia State, Kennesaw State, South Alabama, Tulane, I think they're about to be put in a situation where, look, if we're going to bring these players in and we are going to develop them, and then they're going to be your star wide receiver for the Power 5, Power 4 school, we need something in return. And there's not going to be trades or anything like that. You can't trade the third string linebacker, 2 third string linebackers for a first string wide receiver. Yeah. None of that's going to happen. But I do think at the same time, you got to pay something to that school. And it could go, an easy way to do it is, okay, you're going to take our 1 wide receiver, our star. Okay, you're going to pay us 20, 30 G's, and it's going to go into our NIL collective. Like, I could see that working out. Or it's going to just go to our athletic department wing that's handling contracts for players and revenue. I think that could be a way this could work. And, I don't think a lot of it's going to be made, public, but I think at the same time, if we see that star player from a Southern Miss go to a Tennessee or Alabama or LSU or USC, whatever, I think we'll know that, okay, they're paying something, they're getting something for that player leaving, because Tulane, let's just say, who had the player, or Southern Miss who had the player, they spent a lot of money in getting that kid on campus. Okay, let's reimburse some of that. Let's get some of that back. So I do think that is kind of the way you were talking about with compensatory picks and how the NFL does it. I think college football is trying to figure out right now what type of model would work in the future.
Yeah, tricky because you don't have the trades that kind of make some of that easier in a way. Like, it's actually more difficult to kind of sort through. So
because what is the market value? What's the market value for a player leaving? Okay, what if that player transfers and go craps to bed at the Power 4 school? It's like, okay, all right, we wasted 30, 40 on something like that. But I think bottom line is, I think Hugh Freeze is talking the right way. I think that he is thinking about how to also, at the same time, you got to think about all the revenue that they're going to have to spend on the players in the athletic departments and the budget cuts that are going to come within the athletic department. How can we recoup some of the money that we might have lost with that player by just selling his marketability and at the same time? So it makes things very tricky. Like a real quick one. What if Grayson McCall had gone to Auburn, 2 years ago, and Coastal Carolina cannot sell Grayson McCall to season ticket holders and folks within that program? I think that's where, and I'm just using it as an example, that's where something I could see, okay, Auburn slides Coastal some money, to make sure that, okay, at least they got something out of it.
Maybe even a certain part of the media contract is devoted strictly to, that compensation. So that's not all just the future team that has to pay that entire sum, but that, there's some sort of built-in sum of money that goes to those situations where it is a guy leaving, and maybe it has to be leaving from a specific level for it to be a compensatory pick, whatever you want to call it. But it's complicated. It's still complicated. You need people that are at least getting out to the forefront.
I mean, they're going to have like a transfer budget. I mean, let's be honest. Like, these schools are going to have something in their coffers inside that athletic department says, okay, let's look at the transfer budget account. What's that look like right now? Okay, can we afford to pay, we just keep saying it, but 20, 30 G's for this player to pay that other school? Like, it starts to add up a little bit. So they have got a lot to work out. But I think the good thing about all of this is not just happening in the last 2 weeks. These schools have been working on this for 6 months to a year, knowing that this was coming.
Let's talk about something else that's a little bit complicated, in my opinion. Josh Heupel insists that his Oklahoma relationship isn't really complicated, even though obviously it's now been a decade since he was fired there as the OC, the place that he led to a national championship. But Adam Sparks had the quote that Heupel said that he was joking that he didn't know that Oklahoma was on the schedule this upcoming season. It's like it's Oklahoma's SEC debut, but okay. George Stoyer reported that Oklahoma might have something to be able to honor Heupel before that game that College Game Day is probably going to be at, if we're being honest and looking at the schedule. But what's the sense that you've gotten, as it relates to Heupel talking about his alma mater in this dynamic?
He's been back to Norman, and this is just going off social media posts and a couple of things. He's been back 2 or 3 times, I think, in the last 4 to 5 years for events. Nothing that the University of Oklahoma is kind of like put on. You know what I mean? Like, I think they were celebrating some player. I honestly forgot who it was. And he was out there for that. And I think there was 1 or 2 more times. Look, coaches are going to say the right things, and they're not going to spill all the bad blood out into the media. Josh Heupel, in my opinion, still looks at Oklahoma and says, man, look where I led you guys, and you guys fired me. And after the work that I had done with the quarterbacks that were there, I mean, we all remember quarterbacks that were there. And then you look at the whole situation where, he was at UCF and he was doing great things at the UCF. And then you see where Oklahoma kind of imploded after Lincoln left. And I'm not saying he would have gone and taken that job when Lincoln Riley left for USC because he was setting something up to get ready for Knoxville. The fact that he was not one of the contenders for the job, I think that kind of speaks volumes because they went out and hired Brent Venables. Okay, all right, that's fine. But you had your former star quarterback sitting there who's put up fantastic numbers at UCF and is learning to become that coach. And now you look at what he's done at Tennessee, Oklahoma's got to be like, dang, okay, all right, maybe we should have mended some fences, and maybe Josh would have thought about it, a little bit more. I mean, and it was shutdown mode. He went, I'm not listening to you guys right now. I don't want anything to do with Oklahoma at the moment. And I think at the same time, sure, he would love to have that great relationship with his former school, but the way things went down, there has not been a lot of repair to that relationship from Oklahoma's side, in my opinion. So when you hear him say things like, I didn't know Oklahoma was really on the schedule. I didn't even think about it. Yeah, that man knows who's on the schedule in 3 years. He definitely knows that trip to Oklahoma is coming. And, Josh Heupel is not going to do anything on a game day, that would be out there and be like, oh, thank you, Oklahoma, for honoring me for this nice football, with the years that I was there. I sure appreciate it. No, if they want to do something, and have him out on a Friday night before the game or something like that, okay, that's fine. Honor him that way. but he wouldn't want the attention on him during a game day. And if they're also trying to do it just to do it because he's coming back, like that's kind of another little slap in the face. Like, you're trying to get attention by honoring me. Do this on a week that I'm not playing or something like that, and maybe I'll come back. I don't know, but I do think, and I know they've got that game circled inside that building about 10 miles away from me right now.
The cynic in me wants to say that not Texas, but rather Oklahoma is looking, just down the road, just in case, just what if things don't work out with Brent Venables, and maybe it's not after 2024. I don't think his job is necessarily in jeopardy in an extreme way, but you look up in 2025, it's like, man, it's still not working out. What if that door they want open, and what if they want to be able to make that call this time that they didn't make last time? Is there any part, like, I don't think there's anything Oklahoma can do if that's the way that the relationship is played out and that's where it stands with Heupel. Correct me if I'm wrong here. I don't think there's anything that can be done in the next 2 years that would make Josh Heupel go, yeah, you know what? It's worth it to go back. We've mended those fences.
I think time heals all wounds. I do believe that. But at the same time, it's hard because the folks in Norman, and I'm not talking about the folks in the athletic department, I'm talking about the fan base, the donors, boosters, whatever. They know how it transpired, when he was fired. And so that's what makes it interesting to me. If we're sitting here in 2 years and he's had 2 years with Nico, so counting next season, the season after that, and Tennessee's making the playoffs, and maybe Tennessee makes a run towards a title. I'm not saying wins a title, makes a run towards a title, semifinals, something like that. And the Oklahoma job opens up because Brent Venables is going 5-7 or 6-6 and not making the playoffs, and they can't get things going, which I don't think is, I don't know if that's going to be the case. I like what they have with Jackson Arnold at Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma is going to be fine. I don't think they're going to be as good as what Texas is going to bring immediately to the SEC. But there would be a situation, I think, if Josh Heupel can continue success, and that's 8-4, 9-3 in the regular season, a 10-2, where somebody at Oklahoma is going to reach out and be like, hey, man, you can come on back home. We can resurrect this thing. I mean, we've seen crazier things in college football. Let's be honest. But for that relationship, I do think it would take a lot more work where Josh would, even if his agent picked up the phone and said, hey, man, Oklahoma, nope, click.
Yeah.
I think they've got work to do before that conversation would happen.
It's crazy to think he's already got as many top 25 finishes as any Tennessee coach in the post-Fulmer era. I mean, think about that. Like, just two. It's the best 2-year stretch for Tennessee in 20 years. He's heading into year 4, which is already longer than the Pruitt era lasted. And because of how bad things were post-Pruitt, which everybody should at least remember, I think you could argue that Heupel's approval rating is one of the highest in the sport, really, at this point. Why has Heupel avoided being the punchline that it felt like so many of his Tennessee predecessors were?
First off, he has set himself up in the right way with the folks around the campus. And I mean that as in going out, shaking hands, getting into classes, I think is another thing. Getting involved with the student body as well, the professors. That's where you have to start. Because if you're going to build a football program, you're going to build it around your campus, build it around your players, and you have to have everybody in the same boat. I think the best thing that has ever happened to Tennessee since Fulmer days is having the combination of Danny White and Josh Heupel, because both of them coming from UCF, knowing each other, knowing what they had to do at UCF after Scott Frost left, that was tough. I mean, and I know what his record was at UCF, the last couple of years. But I'm saying in general, you had to build this thing back up, man. It was broken, dude. It was there were fans, and there might be some right now. There are fans that were more excited about what Rick Barnes and Tony Vitello were doing than what the football program was doing. And that cannot be the case at a school like Tennessee. At Kentucky, and this is not a shot at Kentucky, but Kentucky, everybody's talking about Mark Pope right now. I ain't talking about Mark Stoops, and what's upcoming with the football program. So what I'm getting at is that what Josh Heupel has been able to do over these last few years, having Hendon Hooker, that wide receiving core, to be able to run his offense with that wide receiving core, with Velus Jones that first year, Javonte Payton, Cedric Tillman, and I could go on and on with the guys that have been there, Jalen Hyatt that's been there. But I think the turning point came in where things are now, that first year when they went to Gainesville. And I've told this story a couple of times. I talked to a former assistant coach that was there, and it was after the game. They were walking to the bus, and Josh Heupel pulled Velus and he pulled Cedric off the bus. And he said, hey, look, we're not rotating any more guys in. We're not giving guys chances anymore. They can try to prove it on the practice field, but you guys are who we're relying on now. We're not taking you out. We're going. And I think, if I look at the Josh Heupel here and I think of one point where it's like, okay, he got it. I think it was right then in Gainesville, Florida, on the way back to Knoxville, where he said, okay, it's Hendon's show. Here's his wide receivers. Here's what we're going with. And now we're going to go score a bunch of points. And these are the guys that get it. And then you look at what they did. They went out to Missouri. It was like, 60 some odd points. Like, the offense was rolling. I think that what he has done has set a new standard at Tennessee, because there were a lot of folks, man, that didn't think, okay, Josh Heupel, this is going to be weird. This offense, I don't know if it's going to fit, and then he comes in, he's going to bowl games, Orange Bowl. The numbers that the offense put up are blowing people's minds. And then you had the key point in history that set the Heupel era up was the Chase McGrath, 40-yard field goal to beat Alabama, where you said, okay, here's where it is. But there was another one real quick. To me, a point where the fans bought in, fully bought in. It was on the road. It was in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And there were 30,000 Tennessee fans in the stands. And I was on the field. And Connor, bro, I looked around and I was like, okay, this is a road game. I've seen Tennessee fans travel to Florida and Georgia and 10,000, something like that. It was crazy, because the whole lower bowl was filled. The upper deck was filled. In the post game, you had all the fans come down. And at that point, I was like, he's going to succeed here. Like, he's going to do things here. National championship? I don't know. SEC title? I don't know. But he's going to have success at Tennessee. And that's when I think the fans fully bought in to Josh Heupel. And that's where you sit right now, where, everybody's looking forward to the Nico era. I think they have an offense that's going to put up some points next year, especially, the wide receiver position, running back and whatnot. But I think what he's done, Connor, to kind of come full circle, is he's embraced everything Tennessee, where God love Jeremy Pruitt, man. He tried to come in and do it the Alabama way. It ain't going to work at Tennessee trying to do it the Alabama way. And I mean that in a lot of different instances, not just on the field stuff, off the field stuff, behind the scenes. I just feel like what Josh has done is he knew what Tennessee was. He brought his own little spice to it. And now it's just blown up, man. It's all people talk around here.
All right, give me a Pruitt story. You can't just throw that out there. I need something, because I think we all see the NCAA stuff that comes out. We're like, all right, how much was this really a big deal? His wife is handling this. He's got this and, this McDonald's bag. He's figuring out what Zaxby's. Like, you hear all these different things that come out. But is there one to you that I could tell you had a few circling in your mind there that come to mind of like, man, this guy just doesn't quite get it?
It's like which one to pick from. So I'll start it with alleged. Okay, I'll start the story with alleged, according to NCAA investigation. I think when he had his assistant coach Brian Niedermeyer, allegedly sitting in his office with manila folders stacked on the desk and each one of them had cash in it, and players were coming in and out of that office and leaving with folders that were with cash. And the fact that he had an assistant coach that was trying to prove himself to Jeremy, but then Jeremy wanted to act like he didn't know about it. And I don't know if he did or not. And by the way, as crazy as it sounds, I have spoken to Jeremy Pruitt a couple times since that happened. And to me, I find it fascinating. It's like, okay, and I'm not in any way, I'm not trying to toot my own horn when I say this, but the guy that broke the story kind of goes with this is now I'm talking to the guy that, technically he's not here anymore. Like, it's just weird. But there were a lot of stories, and I'm talking, were there cash runs made? Were there behind the scenes where, Jeremy Pruitt and Kevin Steele are getting on a plane to go to California to meet with Henry To'oTo'o to convince him to stay at Tennessee, not knowing at the same time Donnie Plowman and Philip Fulmer were, what's the best way to put it, putting together a firing strategy. There is one that involves Jeremy. The day that Jeremy Pruitt was fired from Tennessee, Donnie Plowman had called for Jeremy to come into the office with Philip. And Jeremy was like, should I have my lawyer there or whatnot? No, it's nothing like that. They get into the office, and Donnie Plowman is sitting there. Is like, Jeremy, these are a lot of violations. I don't know how we can get around this. Jeremy's pleading this case. Well, what did I do? I didn't do anything here. You know what I mean? I'm not the one doing this. These are my assistants. These are I didn't know this was going on. And Jeremy point blank asked Donnie and Philip, "Hey, am I getting fired?" No. You're not getting fired. Like, there's nothing like that going on. Anything? No, you're good. Jeremy Pruitt left that 15-minute meeting, walked out the door. As he was walking out the door, he gets a text from a local media personality in Knoxville that says, "Hey, Jeremy, just wanted to let you know you're getting fired today." And that pretty much set off a chain of events that where we are now. And it's one of the crazier things because Jeremy had a pulse, I think, for what was about to happen. But the fact that, he was just told, "Hey, man, you're good. No, we'll figure it out. Like, you're not getting fired right now." Then all of a sudden, it gets out. It was Martin Luther King Day when he got fired. And all of a sudden, he finds out he's fired from a local media personality in the Knoxville area. I mean, you can't make this stuff up as it was going on. You can't make up the fact that, according to my investigation, the Tennessee staff, I'm not saying whole staff. I want to make this point clear. The people that were involved in the investigation and named pretty much sent a student assistant who was also involved into hiding where he would not be interviewed, sent him back to his hometown so that the NCAA and the Tennessee enforcement staff could not find him and interview him about what was going on that day. And I'm telling you, man, I'm going to write a book about it one day.
I was going to say, you need to.
I am going to write a book because it was the craziest time period that I had ever been a part of covering the sport. And there are a number of stories that, I've either broken in the past or whatnot or looked into. But that one, to me, I was like, okay, this is going on for 2 months. This investigation was going on for 2 months. The NCAA was in the house. The NCAA was interviewing players on the Thursday before the Texas A&M game. And so there were certain players that could not play in that game. And it's just, to me, everything involved in that was mind-blowing. And the way that they tried to cover some things up, I think, is probably the best way to put it. And there are in documents, everybody talks about the cash payment in the McDonald's bag or whatnot. It's in the, Tennessee, God love them. they've been trying to hide, the whole full investigation through a FOIA attempt for 2 years now. But I do know that, the whole Chick-fil-A bag thing, it didn't happen inside the building. Tennessee had cameras, security cameras. They could see if that player's mother was inside the building accepting cash. No, it happened in the parking lot in his pickup truck. And the only thing he had in his car was the Chick-fil-A bags. We just stuffed some cash in there and he gave it to the player's mom. Like it's just, but in that circumstance, like I kind of understand why he did it. Jeremy Pruitt had a heart. Like I get it. There were certain things going on with that player, but I'm just saying everything in the stupidness of some of his staff members that they thought that they were going to get away with this kind of blows my mind, because this wasn't Alabama. This wasn't Georgia, where they know how to do things. Okay. This was Tennessee, and you had folks like, wait a minute, what's he doing? Okay. Damn, these are a lot of violations. Did you try to cover this stuff up? Okay. It's just like, your mind's blown when you go over everything and it along. It was funny. I was figuring out things before the coaching staff was during that time. So I'm sitting here like, okay, this, damn, they don't even know yet. Okay. This is very interesting to me. And I could use colorful language with that, but, I just feel like some of the things that were done, idiotic, not smart, somehow, God love him. Somehow Brian Niedermeyer's got a job now as a defensive coordinator for Tuscaloosa High School. I don't know how that has happened, but I guess it helps to have connections in the business. And at the same time, Jeremy Pruitt, can't get a job in college, and we see all this stuff that's going on with NIL. Like, to end this thing, like in this question, there's a part of me that says everything that he did is pretty much acceptable now in college football. Everything that he did. At the same time, Jeremy Pruitt can't get a sniff of a job. I mean, there was even, according to sources, there was even an ACC school that at least floated the idea out there to hire him as a defensive coordinator, but not have him on the sidelines on Saturdays. But my man can't get a job right now in college sports, and we've got more cheating going on right now in pay for play than anything could have ever imagined at Tennessee during that time period. It's just crazy,
So when you texted Pruitt after he got out of that meeting, what does he respond to you when you break the news to him that he's fired?
Well, first, okay.
Alleged.
All transparency, it was not me who was the media person that texted him.
Not in that moment.
Not in that moment. It was more like of what? Okay. All right. This is really happening. Like get Jimmy Sexton on the phone. Let's figure out what the hell's going on here. Can I get my buyout? That type of deal. I mean, look, the assistant coaches knew they were screwed. And not all of them, like 3 or 4 assistant coaches knew they were screwed. They didn't cover their tracks. You can't pay for Amarius Mims' mom to go to a nail salon, and have the assistant coach, be the one that's footing the bill for it. You can't pay $300 to go get a pedicure, and the school's going to pay for it, and it's just dumb things like that really added up. And the hotel scheme, I've come to learn that was kind of going on before Jeremy Pruitt got here, where they go drop off cash on Fridays that would take care of official visitors during the COVID time that were coming in, and they'd be renting out a whole floor of rooms. And hell, the hotel was in on it. Like, the hotel knew what was happening when they would come into town, and they'd slide an envelope, and there'd be thousands of dollars in there, and it would take care of rooms for visitors coming in town for the weekend during the COVID period, by the way, when they weren't allowed to be in town. So it's just mind blowing. And there are a lot more stories. I look forward to one day sharing that. But my goal is right now, I'd really like to sit down with Jeremy and talk about it all. And the fact that he just lost his appeal with the NCAA. he's free to talk about it. And by the way, he's free to go at the University of Tennessee. And as much as Tennessee had on Jeremy's got a decent amount on Tennessee as well. So I don't know if the battle's over yet when it comes to that buyout. I really don't. But I was always fascinated by the Pruitt era, and I'll end it with this: he was a good guy. He was a good guy, a good family guy, and I think he tried to build it too quick the Alabama way, and I think that's what got him at the end. And he had a couple assistants and a couple of recruiting coordinators that I think were trying to show off to the head coach at the same time that I think killed his tenure as well. So, look forward to that book one day. I really do. I have I tell you this, on my phone that's connected, to my MacBook and whatnot. I have 89 pages of notes coming from that investigation, everything that happened. And I'm talking like long notes. So I look forward to putting it together one day. I really do.
If you need a forward, I'm probably not your guy for it, but let me know. Let me know. We can see what we can figure out.
We can call Talty, right? Talty will help.
Talty would be a good guy for that. He'd be great. Yeah, that's kind of right up his alley, man. Like the layers to this. You're right. It's we lose track of this stuff so quickly, and it's why I like being able to talk about this stuff in the offseason, because right now Tennessee's in such a different place from stability. Yes. And it's everything that Tennessee fans could have hoped for coming out of this period of chaos, the decade of dysfunction, which is so well documented. But, there is...
Because who would have thought about that, Connor? Yeah. Like, honestly, you're coming off a spring where you just fired Jeremy Pruitt. You lost 40-some-odd players to the portal. By the way, big-name players to the portal. A lot, 5 or 6 of them had to leave Tennessee. 5 or 6 of them, there was a reason why they were able to play the next year at a Power 5 program, immunity. And at the same time, and even the parents that were trying to get immunity for their kids that were wrapped up all into this. Like, it is, it's amazing to think of. But I say that to say this: you think of where they were then, and you think where they are now. It might be the best turnaround from an optic standpoint that we've seen in college football in a very, very long time.
Yeah, like if Tennessee this year goes 10-2 with Nico, makes it into the 12-team playoff, it's Heupel's first homegrown quarterback since Dylan Gabriel, which is kind of crazy to think about. If he does that, we're talking about... I know, right? He's still somehow playing college football, which is bananas to think about. But, like, if he does these things and Tennessee gets into the playoff, we're going to be talking about whether or not Josh Heupel is a top 5 coach in the sport. Alternatively, the only way that his approval rating takes a significant hit, and I'm not banking on this happening, but this is what I would call we'll call it a hypothetical, if you will.
Yeah, there you go.
But if he goes 0-3 against Tennessee's 3 biggest rivals, right? Florida, Georgia, Bama. Something that, look, he had the Bama win, the Florida win, being able to beat them in Knoxville was huge. College game in the house, all those different things. But if he goes 0-3 against the big 3 rivals and gets left out of the playoff, Nico, it's kind of still more flashes than, oh my God, he's a superstar. But what's the vibe of Tennessee if that plays out with Heupel? Is there patience? Is there another year built in after last year was supposed to be this floor year? Is there another year where Tennessee, I'm not saying Josh Heupel gets fired if that happens. I do not think that happens. But what is the overall vibe of Tennessee like? Are we getting to that place where suddenly it is much less stable than what we're talking about?
I think it depends on how the losses come. Yeah. I mean, in all honesty, I do think it, because you're going to be going into Nico's second year as a starter. I think you can have a mulligan, on a first year. Okay, Nico's first year, he showed flashes. He was a steady quarterback. Maybe you could say that. But then, fans would be like, okay, like we might have Nico for this last season, and I'm talking about 2 years from now. We better do something here. I know they got the George McIntyre kid coming in. He's committed. Anything can happen, whatever, but he's committed. But you didn't pay a crap ton of money to bring in, and that's another thing people have to think about here, and that's another layer of pressure. We all know who the $8 million man was. It's no secret anymore in college football. You have got to be able to get something out of that. And I think fans and folks will look like, damn, Tennessee spent all that money for that, and I don't think that's going to be the case. I think Nico is going to be a stellar quarterback. I do. But lose to Florida, Georgia, Bama, maybe throw in another one, and you're 8-4.
Oklahoma.
Right. Oklahoma. And I think people are starting like, dang it. Okay. Like we thought this could be the year. Now we have to throw all our chips in to 25 and hope it works out. I think that's when you start having a little bit of nervousness around the program, because right now, they're trying to temper expectations. I get that completely, but they've got a great offensive line. They've got a great stable of running backs, really good wide receivers, the Brew McCoy returning, Brazil coming in. I think this will be their best defensive line that they have had at Tennessee in the last 6 or 7 years, because they have a couple of the FU guys. And I always say this, FU guys are the guys that get off the bus that are going to cause problems. I think they have that. I think the only thing to kind of, in my opinion, kind of worry about is your secondary a little bit. But if they can put it all together this year, then and that's why I mean Tennessee fans think that, okay, this could be a year where we make the playoffs. When the reality is there are a lot of great teams that could make the 12-team playoff, meaning, okay, there's only 12 spots. And as crazy as that sounds, because we're moving to 12, it just, you need to be in contention when November starts. And if that's the case, then I think they'll be fine. But if not, maybe they chalk it up and be like, okay, first year as a starter, let's see what we can build back. So it'll be interesting. And if they beat Florida, and then if Florida goes out and craps the bed, we can get into that another time. But there might be a head coaching search going on in Gainesville, and maybe the best quarterback in the country in 2 years from now, DJ Lagway, might be playing for another team and might be for the Gators. It's just, there's a lot of things that could happen in the SEC. And I'm fascinated to see what happens at Tennessee, but also what happens at Florida. Because if they don't put it together this year, Connor, they could be losing out on the coach because he's getting fired and losing out on one of a generational quarterback. So it's going to be fascinating.
All right, last one for you. I'll get you out of here with a hypothetical.
Yeah.
One that I'm not sure if you've thought about this, but it would be a good entry into the book. What happens first? Jeremy Pruitt returns to an on-field role at the FBS level. We'll say that. And stomachs the 1-year suspension and is just like, all right, some team is willing to say, we're going to have you just sit out and we're going to be able to make this work.
You're not going to coach on Saturdays. You can coach during the week.
Exactly. You can coach during the week. You can game plan. You can do all that other stuff, but you're not going to be here. We're willing to take a chance on you to do that, because that's what he faces if he's going to get back into it. Or Tennessee plays in a national championship, not wins a national championship, but plays in a national championship.
Dang, Connor. I knew you'd send me out with a hard one. Let's see. Jeremy got 5 years. He's already spent 2. I'm gonna go Tennessee plays for a title. I think Tennessee plays for a title before Jeremy Pruitt is back on an FBS sideline, because you said FBS, so that could mean Miami, Miami Institute of Technology, Florida International, Southern Miss. You just said FBS, so I would say Tennessee wins a title, or not wins a title, plays for a national championship, and then Jeremy makes his triumphant return to the field in a defensive coordinator position, and we go from there. You're going to find this tape in like 2 or 3 years, and you're going to come back and you're going to get me at it, because somehow Jeremy's going to get a job in 2 years, and then I'm going to be screwed because I don't have a 5-year window. So that was a nice setup, brother.
Time heals all wounds, except probably for the Jeremy Pruitt Tennessee wounds. Maybe, I don't know.
he recruited some damn strong talent,
Did.
right? I mean, goodness gracious. Yeah. And the crazy part is, look at the guys that are in the NFL now.
I know.
Who'd they come in under? You know, it's like very interesting how all that works out, you know? So is what it is, right?
Trey.
God bless Jeremy Pruitt.
I don't know that sentence has been said a lot in recent memory, man. I really don't.
My man is when he does return, and he will return, he will have one of the most dominating defenses wherever he returns. Because if there's one thing you can't take from Jeremy Pruitt is he might be the best defensive mind Alabama had during their time when he was a coordinator. In my working, I think the combination of him and Saban made it a lot better than the best defensive mind. I think he is a really good defensive coordinator who was not ready to be a head coach. And I do think that he could take over and become a DC somewhere and have them in the top 10 in a couple of years, you know, with recruiting and whatnot, if they can get it. Depends on where he's at. You know, I think that's obvious.
I was going to say counterpoint Kirby Smart, but yeah.
Right. No. Absolutely. No, absolutely. And Kirby deserves all of that. I think that and here's the reason why I said that. If you went back and I'm just going off a fan's perspective and a couple boosters and donors that were around, when Nick Saban had hired Kevin Steele to be the DC for the 1 year, Nick Saban really wanted Jeremy Pruitt to be the coach.
Which is incredible. Yeah.
To be the defensive coordinator. But there is a commissioner that would not allow that to happen. So because of the show cause, things he'd have to go to. But Jeremy could have at least been brought back in to the Alabama program. But that got shot down real quick.
Trey, I'll let you run.
Somehow Butch Jones made it at Bama, though. So
never say never, man. That's the rule
right?
of college athletics these days.
I know.
That's the rule. Great stuff, man. We'll talk soon.
Hey, thanks for having me.